is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Good morning, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and welcome to another great episode of the program, The Bridge, airing live on US Arab Radio and on Facebook. Today, we are discussing women's changing roles and positions in a changing MENA region, the most important gender findings from the Arab Barometer 2022 survey. And with me this morning discussing this timely and important topic is Ms. Salma Al-Shami, Director of Research in Arab Barometer, and Dr. MaryClare Roche, Director of Technology in Arab Barometer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you both. And Salma, I'll start with you. Not everybody in our audience understands or knows what is Arab Barometer. So I know it's a very important organization, has been doing important research for many years, but if you can please kindly give our listeners and viewers an idea about what is Arab Barometer, that would be greatly appreciated.
Of course, and thanks so much again for having us. So Arab Barometer is the longest and largest repository of publicly available data on public opinion from the Middle East and North Africa region. And we have kind of a three-part mission. The first is to track the opinions and how they change of citizens in the MENA region over time. The second is to disseminate knowledge about the region by kind of incorporating citizens' voices and their preferences into our writing and analyzing the data, and more importantly, by making it available so that others may do the same, so that they can access it and kind of shed light on topics. And finally, to build institutional capacity in the region by working closely with our partners, without whom really this project would not be possible. And that's really a two-way street. So we constantly work to see, well, what survey research tells us about best practices in MENA, and then also what MENA teaches us about best practices in survey research, so that this work is collaborative and not simply an extractive data process. So far, we have 7 waves of data that we've completed since 2006, successfully conducting over 125,000 personal interviews across 87 nationally representative surveys in 15 countries through the MENA region. The vast majority of those interviews are face-to-face, and our data and topical reports are all on our website on arabbarometer.org, and including the gender report that MaryClare has authored that we'll be discussing today. So we invite everyone to go check that out and kind of play with the data themselves.
Absolutely. I'm curious, when did the project Arab Barometer actually start, and how many years has it been in effect so far, Salma?
So the first wave was 2006. So from 2006, so we've been doing this for over like 15 years now. Our latest wave, wave 7, was started on October 1st, 2021, so 2021, and ended on September 30th, 2022. So over the course of that year, we were able to gather to distribute the survey in 12 different countries in the MENA region. It is one of our larger waves, and it includes a variety of different topics, from gender to the environment, perceptions of COVID and its consequences, regional rivalries, and preferences for what people want to see their governments doing to improve their lives.
Excellent. You also mentioned the word partners. Can you quickly tell us who are the partners of the Arab Barometer project?
So sure. So we work with research firms on the ground in various hubs. So for example, in Tunisia, and working with most of our North African countries is our partner one-to-one. In Jordan, we work with CSS, the Center for Strategic Studies, and in Iraq, we work with iAccess. So these are research firms who have trained survey enumerators who we work with closely to field the survey. We constantly ask for their input and their feedback on what questions work and what don't work, what needs to be amended to be clearer. We work with them, of course, closely on quality control and kind of monitoring the survey as it comes in, and really they're a part of the backbone of the operation.
Excellent. Now, Salma, can you please give our listeners and viewers an overview of the most important highlights and most important findings in general that came out of the 2022 Arab Barometer research findings?
Of course. So again, these findings were in 12 different countries, and survey work actually, preceded in most countries the war in Ukraine, but some of the countries actually went after it. So only 3 countries, Morocco, Algeria, and Kuwait, kind of completely started after the war in Ukraine, and several were before, with Jordan and Libya and Iraq kind of just finishing up or kind of continuing right over. And that's really, those dates are important to keep in mind, because the first kind of key finding that we saw was an alarming rise in the extent to which the adult population is complaining of food insecurity. That is, in most countries, at least half or more of the population is saying that they ran out of food before they had access to purchase more. And of course, that has likely only been exacerbated since the war in Ukraine has caused global kind of supply chain problems. The second finding that we saw that has been widely discussed is on regime and actually governance preferences. So while there is a slight downtick in the preference for or should I say evaluations of democratic government, people nonetheless prefer it. So they are they see that it's no longer a panacea. It's not a silver bullet solution to any of their problems, which actually other research has shown us is a good thing for the prospects of democratic kind of survival. The third finding is relates to kind of shifting the regional alliances or rivalries kind of are shifting. We are seeing an increasing preference for China over the United States. And its Belt and Road initiatives, which, it's got several quite large contracts with various countries throughout the MENA region. Iraq in particular actually had the 3rd largest contract at valued over $10.5 billion in 2021. So we are kind of seeing a shift there, and yet and a little bit of other I should say changes with respect to countries such as Turkey and Saudi Arabia, which continue to be preferenced in across some of these countries, as has been the case before. Fourth, we are seeing, increasing awareness for environmental issues. Specifically, water is a key problem across the region, though the type of water issue varies a little bit. We see kind of access to drinking water and clean drinking water at that. In some countries be an issue, access to water in general, so water scarcity as kind of another issue. So while water is a regional issue, it's not monocausal in terms of what is causing water problems. Citizens are aware of this. They want government to do more about it, and yet it is not the #1 priority, right, among the list of challenges that a lot of countries face. But again, nonetheless, people want their government to do more. And finally, as we'll be discussing today, we have seen some extremely important findings with respect to gender and to changes in kind of perspectives on rights and roles. I mean, our survey kind of reaffirms that countries are far from achieving gender equality or gender equity, but nonetheless, there are some kind of glimmers of progress in there that I hope MaryClare and I can talk about today.
Excellent. That's a very much robust and comprehensive overview. Thank you so much for that, Salma. And, really building on your last comment, I want to really expand a little bit more on the definitions and the meanings of terms like gender equality, gender equity, gender parity. We want to really help our listeners and viewers everywhere get a better understanding of the meaning of these different terms and the definition of these different terms. So can you please just help us define and understand these different terms, please?
Sure. So let me kind of peg it to how, UN Women will actually define it this way. And by gender equality, we typically mean that rights and responsibilities and opportunities are available to both men and women and do not depend on gender. So that latter part is quite important. So equality doesn't necessarily mean that men and women are the same, but rather that the needs, resources, and priorities of different genders are taken into consideration to facilitate access to those opportunities. In more recent years, what we've seen and especially with respect to kind of discussions on discrimination, right? Gender discrimination being one of multiple sources. We've seen an increasing differentiation between equality and equity. And so we've seen a shift to the word equity to kind of promote this idea of it's not simply giving everyone the same thing, because giving everyone the same thing doesn't take into consideration their specific needs, right? So that's kind of equality. Everyone gets the same thing. To sort of move away from that, the word equity has been increasingly used to kind of drive home this idea that for everybody to have equality of access, you actually need equity of resources. You know, the definition of gender equality, which I started with, which is UN Women, it still uses the term equality, but it very much it introduces and captures this important distinction, moving towards the use of the word equity. So, I mean, an important issue there is to note that gender equality is not just a women's issue, but actually it concerns both men and women, so that society as a whole can develop. And you know, there's the mantra that women's rights are human rights, right? And so as such, it's actually enshrined as the 5th of the 17 Sustainable Development goals. So to gender equality and the empowerment of women. But yeah, so those are generally kind of what we mean when we talk about that.
What about gender parity?
So, I mean, I understand gender parity kind of in the same vein as kind of equity, right? So the idea that so I see kind of equity and parity being used synonymously, and then equality being a little bit separate. But again, this parity is this idea that it's making sure that the outcome or tailoring the inputs so that the outputs are the same, right? So making sure that people have the resources they need, regardless of their gender, to have the same right, to have the same opportunity, to have the same responsibility to participate meaningfully in economics and social and political kind of spheres in their society.
I really like this distinction between equality and equity. And I remember there was this example that was given about, you know, if you have a table and you have family gathering around dinner, and you have, you know, a 65-year-old grandparent, you have somebody in their 40s or 30s, and then you have kids. Are you going to give everyone the exact same meal, including, you know, the same amount of dessert, maybe, right? Like, you know, we're going to give everyone the same cake, regardless of whether they are diabetic or they're not diabetic, or they're going on a special diet or not. And of course, this is not always a good idea, because people can have different needs. They can have different health conditions. They can have different conditions related to their everyday lives, whatever it may be, different tastes and different diets. Therefore, it's never a good idea to give everyone the exact same portion of everything, but rather tailor, what everyone needs to their own, situation, their own health condition, and their own age and demographic profile. So I think this is a good distinction between gender equality and gender equity, and therefore I prefer to use the term equity moving forward.
Sure. So to add to that, actually, in the the next kind of step of that now, gender social justice as being the penultimate kind of equality, equity, and then social justice. Social justice really being removing the barriers. Right. So I'm sure maybe some of your listeners have actually seen there was a very powerful kind of depiction of this, I think similar to what you were talking about sitting around a dinner table of 3 viewers to a soccer match with a fence in front of them. Right. Equality would be giving everybody the same size ladder. Right. But shorter people wouldn't be able to see above it. Equity is giving people different ladders. And then actually social justice is removing the fence. Right. So this is all kind of going towards the social justice, hopefully, end of the spectrum.
Of course, the ultimate result should be, social justice. That's what we're aiming for. And I also like the idea of solidarity between men and women, because we should not look at the relationship as antagonistic. It's not men versus women. It is men and women. Men are half of society. Women are the other half of society. So thinking of some kind of partnership and solidarity and cooperation between them is always the best way moving forward. We'll come to this very interesting discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
As we continue to face COVID-19, we're now facing flu season. Influenza has the potential to infect millions, putting lives and the healthcare system at risk. Now more than ever, it's essential to protect yourself from influenza by getting the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine is safe and effective and can't give you the flu. To protect yourself and those at highest risk, get your flu vaccine. Learn more at michigan.gov/flu. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Enjoy the first Syrian-style cuisine in Michigan. At Damas Cuisine and Catering, you'll find a wide selection of Syrian foods and sweets in our menu, like frikeh, hoisin, grape leaves with steak, mashawi platter, hot mahashi, char-grilled kebab, shawarma, and much more. Get super fast delivery from Damas Cuisine and Catering right to your door. Order online at damascuisine.com/menu and track your order live. Damas Cuisine and Catering, 28841 Orchard Lake Road in Farmington Hills. Call 248-987-4985.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Al-Majid Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263.
Kushat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab offers a great array of your favorite Mediterranean meals. Meals range from lamb specialties, shawarma sandwiches, seafood dinners, and they offer special big trays of your favorite food, plus much more. Kushat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab address is 32839 Northwestern Highway in Farmington Hills. Their phone number is 248-538-9552. That number again is 248-538-9552, and the supermarket is open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Kushat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab will definitely leave you satisfied.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we're discussing today a very important and timely topic: women in a changing MENA region, the most important gender findings of the Arab Barometer 2022 survey results. And with me this morning discussing this important and timely topic are Ms. Salma Al-Shami, Director of Research in Arab Barometer, and Dr. MaryClare Roche, Director of Technology in Arab Barometer. MaryClare, coming to you now to really shed light on some of the most important findings from this year's Arab Barometer 2022 survey when it comes to issues of gender equality, gender equity, gender parity in the MENA region. And of course, the MENA region is the Middle East and North Africa. And I know that you guys have covered 12 countries in the MENA region, which I find to be very important, very significant, and very useful. So let me start with something that I am really most concerned about, which is women's participation and visibility in the public sphere, especially when it comes to political participation and political leadership. Can you please help our listeners and viewers understand how has this concept of political participation and political leadership been changing and shifting for women in the MENA region? Which countries have done better in 2022? Which countries have done worse, and why?
Yeah, I think really one of our most interesting findings in terms of gender, and even in terms of the survey as a whole, would be that we see this change in opinion over time specifically with respect to political leadership. So one question that we have been asking since the beginning of the survey is, how strongly do you agree that men are better political leaders than women? And really across the region, we have seen this decline, this pretty significant decline in the countries that we survey. And not only as an overall opinion, but also within an age cohort, we see people's opinions changing. So people who we asked 10 years ago when they were in the 30 to 39 age bracket, 10 years later, they're in the 40 to 49 year age bracket. And that same group of people are less likely to agree that men are better political leaders than women. And that the same is true if you look at the 40 to 49 group, who are now 50 to 59. So it's not a case of just younger people who tend to have more liberal views becoming older and kind of aging out, older people aging out of the survey, but it's really people are changing their minds. And one reason that I think is pretty striking is the inclusion of gender quotas in the MENA region. In a lot of the constitutions that were redesigned after the 2011 uprisings, a lot of those included quotas where either party list seats or the number of seats in a legislature were specifically set aside for women. And once people began seeing women in positions of power, people started to tend to think that women are capable of being in positions of power. Tunisia is an especially striking example of this. We really we see a very strong decrease in agreement that men are better than women in political leadership once women took seats in the Tunisian parliament. And then we see again, just in our most recent results, we see another sharp decrease just after Tunisia became the first country in the MENA region to have a woman as a head of state. And we specifically asked the Tunisian citizens what they thought of their new prime minister. And most citizens did say that they trusted Prime Minister Boudin. And about a quarter of them were kind of reserving their opinion because Tunisia was one of the first countries we surveyed. That was in October 2021, and that was shortly after her appointment. But they had much more trust in her than the previous prime minister. And again, overall, there's a sharp decrease from when we last asked this question in 2018 in Tunisia. While Tunisia is a special case because of Prime Minister Boudin, Egypt is another particularly interesting case where overall we still see 66% of citizens agreeing that men are better at political leadership than women. But when we first asked this question 10 years ago, it was 92% of citizens. So even though Egypt in particular still has a pretty consistent majority kind of holding gendered views, this is far fewer citizens than when we first started. And Egypt is really a case where we've seen a lot of change, even though it's still hovering above 50%, we still see a big change from when we first started 10 years ago. Algeria is a case where we really haven't seen much change. In some cases, it's gone slightly up, where people are starting to agree that men are better at political leadership. And again, this could be due to seeing women in positions of power. Algeria had a gender quota that was really relaxed and has been pretty easy to get around, to not include women in the national political sphere. And because of women's poor performance in achieving seats and really not being able to take a major role in politics, we really don't see any opinions changing, and even negative opinions. But this is likely due to the policy that's undermining their ability to really showcase their talents.
Very interesting. It seems there are certainly demographic and generational shifts and changes. The dynamics of age and generation are very much shifting and changing within the region, which is very interesting. And of course, Tunisia especially, really deserves a special hats, or thumbs up to say, they really have been doing very good work when it comes to gender equality, gender equity, because they've been giving, more rights to women, and women have been also represented in, the judicial system. They've been sitting on the bench as judges and making better gains compared to women in the rest of the Arab world and the MENA region at large. MaryClare, also, we want to shift our attention to two very important and intertwined issues, which are the educational aspect and the employment aspect, which are always very much interlinked. It's no secret that women in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, are still suffering from many barriers, many obstacles, and many hurdles, including access to education and therefore access to employment opportunities. Can you please help our listeners and viewers get a better sense of the most important findings of the Arab Barometer 2022 research findings when it comes to these two important issues and their impact on women in the MENA region?
Of course. So we do find that another question we ask if people think education is more important for male students, university level education, is it more important for male students than female students? And like the question of politics, we do see a change in views. We see people becoming much less likely to agree with that statement. The changes are not quite as dramatic as the views in politics, but that's likely because they started from a lower level of agreement. So there's less room to move downward, which is a good thing. And it is true, women that have at least a secondary education or higher are much more likely to hold jobs. Women with less than a secondary education are much more likely to identify primarily as housewives. And we do look at the barriers to women getting a job. We have a whole slew of questions on what people perceive as barriers that women face when trying to enter the workforce. MENA does have among the lowest, if not the lowest, female labor force participation rate in regions around the world. The number one reason when we provided a list of reasons and we asked people what they thought the biggest reason of those were, childcare really came up as the primary reason again and again. A lack of access to it. So women are traditionally responsible for being homemakers, for taking care of the children, and we can talk more about this later, where we do we have some questions that kind of get at the perception of household roles. And so without access to daycares, being able to reliably get your children there, we really that's in almost every country, that's the number one reason that both men and women cite. Women are much more likely to bring this up than men. In fact, we can really we gave 6 options on what could be the biggest barriers to entry. 3 we can think of as more structural issues that policy can address, such as lack of access to childcare. Another example is lack of transportation. So if roads improved, if safety of transportation improved, And the third, more structural idea is low wages. So low wages actually comes in second as the most frequently cited reason that women are not able to enter the workforce. And this could be tied very closely to lack of childcare. If you have to pay someone to watch your children while you're at work, but it costs more to have your children looked after by someone else, then you make it your job, it really doesn't make sense to enter the workforce. So these are things that policy can address. And then we also gave some more like cultural examples, what are more internalized by people that are harder for policy to change, which was are men being given priority over women? Are people not comfortable with a mixed gendered workspace, or do people think it's not socially acceptable for women to work outside the home? And what's really striking is we see women tend to say, to give a structural reason that it's the transportation, it's the lack of childcare, it's the low wages, and men tend to think that it is more of a cultural reason, that women are uncomfortable in mixed gendered workspaces, that women think men are being given priority, etc. And this is really an issue, this lack of communication between the genders, because men really are in the positions to address these structural issues. In particular, men make up a majority of positions of policymaking. And if there's a disconnect in what women are saying that they're facing, that women think are challenges to go to work, and what men think are challenges prevent women from going to work, especially when men think it's these, embedded ideas there's a limited amount to what governments can do about that, but governments really can take steps to address these issues, the structural ones. And if men don't realize that's really what's preventing women from going to work, that's going to be a challenging, they're not going to be able to increase workforce participation without conversations.
It's interesting because it seems like there's a whole, plethora of different factors, right, interacting here. There are definitely infrastructural factors, but there are also cultural factors and social factors as well. Briefly, MaryClare, can you just give us an idea about some of the countries that maybe have shown some kind of improvement in terms of their indicators when it comes to, education and employment for women in the year 2022, and those that did not show the same level of improvement in terms of their gender indicators in education and employment in 2022, and why this is the case?
So I would say one country I want to highlight, interestingly, this isn't about improvement or unimprovement, or not unimprovement, but in the opposite way. Lebanon has remained steady, but only 11% of Lebanese citizens ever agreed that university education is more important for men or women, or for men over women. And Lebanon also so again, one question we did ask was, one option we gave was that it's not socially acceptable, and that was very, very few people said that. Of course, this is a question when we were asking about specific genders. This is not or specific barriers to women entering the workforce. That's a new question that we've just asked, that we're very excited about to see these findings, but we haven't really had a chance to look at it over time yet. But I think a really great indication is that in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Tunisia, it's less than 10% of people think that it's socially unacceptable for women to go to work. Also, fewer than 1 in 5 people across the countries think that men are being given priority. So again, this is perceptions, but even when we break this down into gendered perceptions, neither men nor women seem to think that men are given priority in the workplace when they are interviewing. So it does seem to be that what needs to happen is getting women into the door, into the interviewing room. That can be where the focus is. But the changing views of women getting an education, it is important. I think Salma can speak a little bit about how COVID impacted women's education. We can talk about that more when we talk about COVID as a whole. But yes.
Yeah, thank you, MaryClare. Definitely. We're going to come back to this very important point right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Dana, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we're discussing today a very important and timely topic: women in a changing MENA region, the most important gender findings from the Arab Barometer 2022 survey, And with me this morning discussing this important and timely topic are Ms. Salma Al-Shami, Director of Research in Arab Barometer, and Dr. MaryClare Roche, Director of Technology in Arab Barometer. Salma, it is no secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has had huge impacts on women all over the world, especially in the developing parts of the world, like the Arab world and the MENA region or the Middle East and North Africa. Can you please give us some background and some information as to the most important impacts and implications and effects that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on Arab women and women in the Middle East and MENA region in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me actually back up for a minute. So in our wave 5 findings, which were our last kind of face-to-face pre-pandemic, and that was between 2018 and 2019, what we saw there was that women had made significant gains in equal rights, but less so in terms of support for equal roles. So what I mean by that is that at that point, across 11 countries, half or more agreed on the measure that MaryClare kind of noted, that the most citizens have the right to be a head of state. And that level of agreement was actually quite high in countries, for example, like Lebanon, where 77%, in Morocco, it was 72%, in Iraq, it was 67%, and same in Tunisia. But despite the majority that said it at that point, where they affirmed the right of a woman to be the head of state, most citizens actually, as you just heard, didn't believe that a woman would be as effective in that role as a man would. So in 11 of 12 countries, again, that we asked, half or more agreed that men were better at political leadership than women, and in 9 out of those countries, the shares were actually considerably higher than 50%. So this pre-pandemic kind of incongruity between equality in rights, but perceived inequality in roles, right, stood to be kind of further reified as COVID pushed everything towards the house, and as towards women's domestic responsibilities increased and simultaneously kind of had them suffer setbacks both at home and in the labor market. So on our wave 6 surveys, which were on the phone during the pandemic, we saw 2 pieces. So first of all, COVID kind of exacerbated kind of workforce disparities in labor market participation. So among first, as MaryClare had noted, it is still the case that the imbalance in workforce participation between men and women is the most stark in the Middle East and North Africa, or it's more stark in that region than it is anywhere else in the world. And so, what we saw was that not only was there a big gender imbalance between people who said that COVID did not affect their labor force participation because they were already unemployed, right? So we already saw that there was this big gap between women who did and did not participate, but women who among those who were impacted, right? Women were disproportionately in more countries forced to actually go and work from home. Right. And so during the pandemic, that was particularly problematic because what we also saw was an increase in non-monetized labor, or in other words, what is called the care economy. So among women who self-identified as housewives, the many and the majority in most cases actually suggested that the amount of work that they had to do at home increased. And this was particularly the case as kind of lockdowns forced activities that would ordinarily be done in the public sphere, like the education of children, into the home. And women were more responsible for that. That was also reflected both in our 2006 surveys in terms of concern over the spread of COVID-19, where women were actually more concerned than men about that spread. That has kind of continued to some extent into our wave 7 findings, but they are muted a little bit. But kind of coming to the present, these 2022 findings from our newest face-to-face surveys, of all the kind of significant and negative, frankly, effects of COVID-19 on women, I think the one that has had us most alarmed is the increase in gender-based violence. So During the pandemic, this was actually dubbed a shadow pandemic because MENA was not exceptional in the fact that violence against women was on the rise globally. And in our Wave 7 findings, what we've seen is that in 4 out of the 12 surveyed countries, 50% or more actually suggested that violence against women had increased. It's 50% in Jordan to 61% in Tunisia. Pluralities in some of the other countries mentioned that it at least had kind of stayed the same. I will say, though, we also see a stark gender divide here where women in all of these countries were more likely to say that violence against women increased, and men were more likely to say that violence against women decreased. Which is quite problematic. The one thing we did note, though, is that it was very, very small minorities that actually said that it wasn't a problem at all, either pre-pandemic or now, right? So there is recognition that the problem exists. The perceptions of increase or decrease vary greatly according to gender, but the shares of people who are saying it is increasing or even stayed the same, right? People that acknowledge that it happens in general is actually quite alarming.
Very interesting. There is no doubt that the pandemic did have huge impacts, especially on more marginalized communities. And women are indeed among the marginalized communities in many societies, especially societies with developmental issues or societies that are still struggling with a lot of issues in the realms of the economy, social equity, social justice, economic development, industry, you name it. So I also think that the issue of domestic violence and how it's being perceived by both men and women in this part of the world is very interesting, and we will continue this important discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937, 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we're discussing today a very important and timely topic: women's changing status and position in a changing MENA region, the most important gender findings from the Arab Barometer 2022 survey. And with me this morning discussing this important and timely topic are Ms. Salma Al-Shami, Director of Research in Arab Barometer, and Dr. MaryClare Roche, Director of Technology in Arab Barometer. MaryClare, I want to come to you with an important question about the differences and disparities in the perceptions of men and women to issues related to women's status in society, whether we're talking about women's participation in the public sphere, their political participation, economic access, access to education, or whether we are talking about women's position in the home or the household. How are these issues perceived differently among men and women as the results of the Arab Barometer 2022 survey are showing or revealing?
So we do, one really important question we ask is how much someone agrees with whether or not a man, the male head of household, should have the final say in all decisions regarding the family. And this has certainly changed. This has decreased, like we've seen with education and politics. Fewer citizens tend to agree. And this is mostly driven by women. We've seen really, although men have also changed their minds on this, fewer men are agreeing, far fewer women are agreeing. And while women always agreed with the statement less than men, far fewer agree now than 10 years ago. We also have several questions specifically relating to decisions being made in the household. We asked who should be in charge of household budgeting, and we asked who should be in charge of helping children study, kind of to get a sense of roles with children and roles with finances. And in both cases, women are far more likely to say that the both heads of households, both male and female heads of households, should share these responsibilities equally, while men tend to say that the male head of household should have the final say over financial decisions, and the female head of household should have a say, should be in charge of helping children with studying. So we do see that while citizens are kind of changing their minds slowly but surely, when it comes to responsibilities in the household, while women think this should be more of a partnership, we do see men still having much more gendered views on this. And one thing that I thought was interesting was that women who are widowed or separated from their partner are much more likely to say that the female head of household should be in charge of the budgeting rather than the male head of households. And we don't, follow up and ask why, but I thought that was an interesting trend there.
Absolutely, this is very interesting. Did we see any kind of differences across different countries, the 12 surveyed countries, MaryClare, in terms of maybe the perceptions that are different between men and women? Maybe in some countries, the gap was bigger in terms of the differences or disparities between men and women's views and perceptions of these issues compared to other countries?
Yes, I would say that they followed kind of along the same lines that we've been seeing throughout the attitudes, where countries like Tunisia and Lebanon tend to have more views where both head of household should equally share responsibilities, whereas countries like Egypt and Algeria tend to have a view that the more gendered view between the two. And really the biggest differences in perception was with the ideas of budgeting. So helping with children, that's much closer to, the differences are not as big, where men are still more likely to say it should be the woman's head of household's job, but the difference isn't that big. When it comes to budgeting, that's really where we see the big differences in what men and women think who should be in charge and how these duties should be split, which is a really, really important part of a family dynamic. And I think Salma can speak to this too, but budgeting, especially with this pandemic, it's really hit prices hard and families hard. And we see women that have a higher education, women that have a job, are much more likely to be above the much more likely to be able to cover their monthly expenses than women who aren't. And it's a question of who's in charge of the money that they bring home at the end of the day.
Very interesting. And I assume, of course, there are also generational differences related to the level of education of both the men and the women, and definitely single moms, as they say, or single women who are, widowed or who are divorced, definitely also share the view that they really carry the burden of the budgeting in the household, much more so than women maybe who have a male supporter or a spouse. Salma, I come to you with the last question, which is really the next steps for Arab Barometer moving forward. What are your forthcoming and upcoming projects, please?
Of course. So we have just finished this seventh wave, and as we kind of digest it more, the coming kind of piece will be to as MaryClare started to say, decide, where are the places where we want to ask why, where we want to, to know more of what's going on, kind of accordingly to what she was talking about in terms of budgeting. One of the findings that we saw was that in some countries, actually, the share of women who were reporting food insecurity was actually significantly higher than the share of men who was doing that. And that seemed to also relate to participation in the workforce, where women who participated, who had a job, were actually much less likely to say that they were food insecure than women who had a job. And that correlates with kind of the ratio of employed women to, or women that I should say, who had a source of income versus women who did not have a source of income. So kind of probing, I think, the intersectionality of kind of what inputs affect how people perceive kind of gender equity, as you suggested at the beginning. Do people understand it in the same way across all countries? We have started to get this information on not all barriers are seen as impediments only to one person, to one gender rather than the other. So kind of continuing to probe about that, and potentially doing some more emergent work where we actually ask people to tell us about it. But I think MaryClare also had a few kind of last thoughts on that.
Sure. So one thing that we're really working with to get an idea, instead of providing people with answers, to leave the questions open-ended and have them tell us, what they see the barriers to entry are, the barriers to education, et cetera. We're working with natural language processing, when we can take, again, we have over 26,000 interviews in this survey alone, this wave of surveys. And we've been doing this for 10 years. It's not possible for, it's not realistic for us to sit down and look at every single answer, but with new technologies that we've been working on, I've been working on in particular, to kind of get at what people are telling us, with this natural language processing algorithms, we can open up these questions, really hear what people are saying, and develop our survey to be more reflective of what people have on their minds in the future.
Excellent. This is very, very important work. I certainly wish you and wish the entire team of Arab Barometer much success in all your upcoming and forthcoming projects, and please continue to inform Arab public opinion about the changing trends in the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa, about education, the economy, employment, women, gender relations, and much more. Thank you so much, Salma and MaryClare, for being my guests today.
Thank you so much, Sayed. This was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks to all our listeners and viewers everywhere. Take care, stay safe, and stay well. Goodbye.